got over 100 people with us, so it feels like that's sufficient to make us quorate. And to start, what I hope we'll reflect on will be the kickoff for something that has the potential to be not only really exciting, but also really important in ushering in the next phase of activity around the transition to net zero. And so it's the launch of the Local Energy Systems Scottish Industry Network, an opportunity to start to build collaborations and consortia across Scotland, across industry, to work together on developing local leadership, local programs to support the transition to a cleaner energy future for us all, but also to drive economic growth. I'm Phil New. I'm the Chief Exec of the Energy Systems Catapult. We will be playing a role in helping support this very important network. So I'm proud and delighted to be able to participate today, and it'll be my job over the next hour and a half or so to try and act as a little bit of a compere, a host, and to support all of our great speakers as we talk more about what the ambition is for this network, but also hopefully are able to respond to any of the questions that you have, any of the issues that you seek to raise. It really is timely to put a new light, new energy into the importance of local solutions to the net zero challenge. And one of the things that struck me recently is, perhaps if we've learned anything from COVID and the response to the horrible pandemic, it has been through the inoculation program that very often harnessing the strength of local networks, local expertise, local capability in support of a big common agenda can be so much more effective than simply relying on the top down. So I'm so optimistic for the potential for this program to play through. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. Is the next slide up? Sorry. Yeah, thank you. So here's the agenda. And as you can see, we've got a great lineup of speakers. So in a second, I will be talking through the supportive comments from Paul Wheelhouse, the Minister for Energy, Connectivity and the Islands. Unfortunately, the Minister hasn't been able to join us today for technical reasons. Nonetheless, he has written some very supportive words, which I'll share with everyone. We're hopeful that we will get some more information from him that we'll share later. After that, we have Professor Sir Jim MacDonald. I'm sure no stranger to any of us, and then Andy MacDonald from Scottish Enterprise, Audrey McIver from Highlands and Islands Enterprise, and Neil Kermode from the European Marine Energy Centre. There'll be opportunities in all of this to reflect on the content, and I welcome your input through the question channel as well. So to start with then, I will now, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to impersonate Mr. Wheelhouse, but I'll do my best to just read out the key messages that he has to say. So Mr. Wheelhouse would like to welcome and thank everyone for their attendance today for the launch of the Local Energy Systems Scottish Industry Network, or LESSIN. Mr. Wheelhouse sent his apologies that he can't be here, but is keen to offer his support. This is an exciting new initiative, one that plays to Scotland's strengths in how we seek to work in collaboration for the greater good. Before beginning, Mr. Wheelhouse would like to offer his thanks to you all for adapting working practices to facilitate this online event. These are challenging times as the pandemic continues to impact on all our daily lives, both on a professional and a personal level. The Scottish Government are carefully and cautiously aiming for a green recovery that accelerates our transition towards a net zero economy which promotes inclusive growth and creates opportunities for all. Our enterprise agencies are key partners in supporting Scotland's green recovery. And the launch today of the Local Energy Systems Scottish Industry Network, or LESSIN, is part of that green recovery. This Pan-Scotland programme supports one of the key commitments in the Scottish Government's Local Energy Policy Statement, published in January this year, and contributes to Scotland's wider energy programme commitments. This programme aims to facilitate the development of strong partnerships in delivering energy projects at a local level. This is fundamental in decarbonising the whole energy system across Scotland. This will aid in Scottish Government's commitments in transitioning to and meeting our net zero emissions target for 2045. This was set out within the Scottish Government's programme for government, published in September 2020, detailing our commitment to achieving secure, affordable and clean energy for Scotland. Local energy systems take a holistic view, considering all options for generation and use of heat, transport and electricity within a defined area. They're focused on maximising sustainability and efficiency and are necessary for Scotland in meeting challenging emissions targets going forward, as set out in the Local Energy Policy Statement. As Scotland's energy system becomes increasingly decentralised, there will be a greater need for considering local solutions to meet local needs. Balancing supply and demand locally through smart integration of different elements of the energy system will ensure that renewable energy penetration is maximised, while also enabling projects to focus on local and community benefits and minimise fuel poverty. Local energy cannot be delivered in isolation. It must develop alongside a national energy network with collaboration across a range of different organisations to achieve its outcomes. But in achieving decentralisation, it is essential to facilitate communication and collaboration across both public and private sector organisations who deliver energy services for the benefit of local consumers. LESSIN seeks to carry this out by delivering meaningful engagement with companies and other organisations seeking project partners, support and investment. This will allow for increased opportunities to maximise economic benefit to Scotland and to harness learning for those involved, accelerating the sector's drive toward commercialisation. This programme will bring together various collaborators from different parts of the sector, including tech companies, project managers, regulators, networks, investors and others, to foster collaboration and innovation. This Local Energy Systems Scottish Industry Network will also bring together the various strands of existing and potential business interests in local energy, with particular focus on supporting SMEs. LESSIN will enable the collaborators to share the knowledge required to deliver projects, share advanced know-how, connect companies to project owners, develop viable business models, and attract inward investors. LESSIN will allow for increased local energy systems industry engagement and provide a mechanism for the sector to collaborate and share knowledge. The innovation and market opportunities will be identified through cluster building activity, including many meetings and workshops in the coming years, and will seek to enable successful demonstration of commercial projects of scale in Scotland. The Local Energy Systems Scottish Industry Network will also act to signpost companies towards appropriate funding opportunities, such as through our enterprise agencies and the wider Scottish Innovation Network. Through its excellent company base, Scotland has a real opportunity to take advantage of this emerging global opportunity. By supporting that company base in coming together and through collaboration through LESSIN, we are taking the first step towards grasping that opportunity. Beyond the establishment of the programme, the enterprise agencies will also continue to seek to aid in facilitating key local energy systems projects across Scotland. Ultimately, this will enable export of Scottish expertise, products and services in local energy systems markets around the world. Mr. Wheelhouse would therefore encourage all of the companies, project owners, support providers and investors attending this event today to sign up to the network and take advantage of the fantastic service on offer. In doing so, this will allow the attendees here today to come together to strengthen the local energy systems sector in Scotland. So they are the words, powerful words, I think, from the Minister, Paul Wheelhouse. You've heard more than enough from me, and much more than was anticipated at this stage of the event. So with no further ado, I'm delighted to hand over to Sir Jim MacDonald, of course, of Strathclyde University and many other relevant affiliations. Sir Jim.
Thank you very much, Phil, and good morning. And it's great to see such a wonderful scale of participation, and many thanks to you, Phil, and to our colleagues in ETP for pulling the event together this morning. So local energy systems, colleagues, terrifically well timed, as you've heard both from Phil and through the words of Mr. Wheelhouse. We know what's happening in terms of net zero. I will reflect on that momentarily, but it's always great to have a historical reflection as well. And we're at this very important inflection point. I smile when I think for the past 30 years, it's been for me an imperative to get started on decarbonisation and dealing with climate change. But there can be no doubt now that we are now at this critical stage as we move towards 2050 to get moving. We can't leave it till 2049 to have all the major projects, deployments, innovations and examples of good practice before we achieve 2050. So the time is now, and your participation today is key to get involved in LESSIN and to use the power of local energy systems. I mentioned the historical reference. 1926, a great Scotsman called Lord Weir led the production of the Electricity Supply Act, which really took a massive amount of distributed energy systems across the UK and imagined the grid, which led to the powerful driver both for secure electricity supplies, but for economic growth and for industrialisation. But here we are now well into the 21st century, and there's a chance now to reimagine what the energy systems look like. And all of you who are on this call today, innovators, technologists, business people from the public sector, representatives of local communities, we have a chance now to really have an impact, because we need that innovation, we need that reimagining, and we need the support that Phil's talked about from Scottish Enterprise, Highlands and Islands, Scottish Government, indeed the Catapult and the ETP itself. So please take this call to arms, as it were, to get involved in the network and push forward. So the drive here is about low carbon initiative and innovations. And it's key here through the partnership that we've got here today that we drive it forward. We've mentioned COVID-19, and it's very hard not to contextualise what we're thinking about these days outside the current challenges, but of course we'll get through it. 2021 is already showing signs of optimism. But COVID-19, I think, as Phil has referred to, will be undoubtedly, and is already, as we're in this mode of virtual engagement this morning, a major driver for digital transformation. And that has enormous relevance for the energy system as well. There's much work that's building up in the Cabinet Office and in the departments around that in Whitehall about how data can be a driver for that decarbonisation. But I'd also like to think, because we're seeing this concerted societal effort, and we can see that by working together, we can indeed push harder and achieve earlier our net zero targets. So what are the drivers? Now, very clearly, it's the challenge of climate change, the imperative to deliver net zero by 2050. And of course, across the UK, we've got some other targets. The Scottish Government itself has targeted 2045. The city of Glasgow, where I work, 2030, and using the catapult, if you let me use that, Phil, of COP26 to drive forward the city's ambitions to net zero. But all of this is key. And another more recent historical reference, we're coming up for only 15 years ago that Nick Stern, was Sir Nick Stern then, it's now Lord Stern, published The Economics of Climate Change. Nick, a highly accomplished economist from the London School of Economics. It's my privilege and pleasure to work with him in the Council for Science and Technology. He proposed that in addressing the challenges of climate change, we need, of course, international coordination, we need national coordination, but there was reference there to that deep-seated and community-based approach to this as well, whether it's in behaviours, whether it's in deployment, whether it's in seeking out those economic opportunities. So innovation was key. Nick identified that, not only the support for research, but the translation and the acceleration of technologies and systems and new approaches to get that into deployment, and also taking this connected and concerted activity to build a new economy. And that's really what we're talking about today. It's how this new network, LESSIN, can help all of you connect, create virtual engagements in the short term, create new opportunities in the medium term. But for me, the key messages from me today are that we're at a real point of not only convergence, and there's much going on, I'll refer just briefly in a moment, but if I continue that sort of mathematical reference, not just convergence, but an inflection point, and we really have no option, and I think the will is there, both in terms of societal awareness, but policy drivers and the economic opportunity, the inflection point to get things done. I think what's happened over the past year alone in terms of policy drivers, well, even before that, and great credit to the Scottish Government, over the past 5 years, I think the Scottish Government and its departments and its partners, both in academia and industry, really started to talk a lot about energy systems and that whole energy systems approach, the integration in heat, electricity, transport, the emerging vector of hydrogen. And Chris Stark, who many of you will know, who's now Chief Executive at the Committee on Climate Change, was involved in that. I was my pleasure to work with him and many others as I chair the Scottish Government's Energy Advisory Board with the First Minister. I think Scotland showed that, well, a small nation, we can think big. And that's what I would say to those of you that are imagining local energy systems. You're a component, but you're a very important component. And in aggregation, we can bring forward some big ideas. So Scottish Government in the thick of things. UK Government, of course, the Prime Minister at the tail end of last year initially published the 10-point plan. And there are many elements in that 10-point plan that is directly relevant to local energy systems, whether it's in hydrogen, its production, its use for transport, power in homes, electric vehicles, of course, as we move towards greater electrification, public transport, homes and public buildings. And is it where that autonomy and that potential disaggregation of energy systems to allow us to get that drive at the local level. And that was followed quickly on its heels by the Energy White Paper, which was making a very clear commitment to not only net zero, but driving an innovation-led economy. So all the pointers are there. It seems to me that the political rhetoric is much more than that. It's a commitment. And with all else that's going around us in terms of geopolitical dynamics, there's a need here for the UK and here in Scotland to reimagine ourselves in terms of innovation, technology, taking advantage of markets, but at the heart of that, having a net zero focus to make sure our investments are coherent and consistent with what we're trying to achieve. On the 30th of January 2020, the Prime Minister's Council for Science and Technology wrote to the Prime Minister in a letter that talked about achieving net zero through a whole systems approach. And I would commend that to you. Many of you will be aware of this, but the notion of systems and energy systems has really struck a chord now. Now, Phil's organisation and the Energy Systems Catapult has been evangelising about this for years, but the penny has dropped now, and we understand, well, there are big complex systems in terms of policy activity, local authorities, planning conditions, technology, activities, the need for demonstration, society's expectations that we need to make a move. The penny has dropped, and there's a constant conversation now about a systems approach in government generally, but particularly in the energy domain. And if I may say, Phil's organisation, the Energy Systems Catapult, published in the last year, the report called Leading the Way on Net Zero, producing scenarios for 2050. Again, I would commend that to you, because we need to imagine what the future looks like, but not leave it for 30 years till we achieve it. By imagining the future, it informs our decision making and the advances that we can make now. And I should say, last but not least, I am president of the Royal Academy of Engineering. Our National Engineering Policy Centre has also set up a significant group looking at net zero and taking a systems perspective on the climate challenge, which is about advancing a low carbon economy through rapid and large scale systemic changes. And whilst it's large scale, a large scale is made up of many component parts, hence a system, hence the importance of local energy systems. So, final few words from me, Phil. Our colleagues in National Grid and many of us that have been involved with them for many years have talked about the 3Ds in energy going forward, and the 3Ds being decarbonisation, decentralisation and digitalisation, and that's driving the evolution of our network. The Lord Weir report of 1926 imagined a highly integrated, large-scale transmission system, giving us secure supplies. We can invert that now. We can strategically and applying logic invert that and now think about a new model where the whole is made up of very highly sophisticated and highly dynamic components, hence local energy systems. So the 3Ds, decarbonisation, decentralisation and digitalisation. I will add a fourth D today to celebrate LESSIN, and that's democratisation through the energy systems, the local energy systems that many of you represent. So think about 4Ds going forward and see that you, within the local energy systems communities and the technologists and innovators and facilitators that are on the call, we can make this happen. In many ways, if I don't want to coin a phrase, but thinking about it this morning, it's almost like swarm decarbonisation. We can get lots of local energy systems imagined, deployed, demonstrated, and then driven forward. This will aggregate local energy systems up into very much more meaningful parts of the overall energy systems. It will give us a diversity of approaches, which is key, because we need to celebrate and support the value of innovation. And many of you are innovators, inventors, technologists, and systems designers. Let's make sure we support all of you so that we can accelerate the demonstration and deployment of these technologies. We've had some examples of this before. Scottish Enterprise and my own Power Network Demonstration Centre at Strathclyde on Smart Grid a few years ago opened up the doors to innovators and other companies from a diverse set of other sectors, medical technologies, the digital analytics point of the perspectives, and brought together that drive for new thinking and innovation. And to the ETP, my congratulations to them to work with ESC. It's a fantastic asset in Scotland, 13 universities, with support from Scottish Government that we're concluding will be moving to have produced 150 PhD students co-invested by industry around energy technologies and increasingly around energy systems, and our knowledge exchange network touching almost 600 SMEs. So we've done this before. The drive from Energy Systems Catapult, from ETP, from Scottish Enterprise, Highlands and Islands Enterprise, and indeed Scottish Government is giving us a great alliance here. And I strongly encourage you on the call today to participate and register. So let me conclude, Phil, by saying I'm delighted that LESSIN is being launched today. The scale of participation is really encouraging. I believe the size of the prize is also enormous, and LESSIN can be a key exemplar to show how local energy systems are a key element on the journey to net zero. And as Nick Stern would say, in that journey, let us also create industries and economic opportunity. So good luck for the rest of the day, and well done to all that put this event together. Thank you.
So Jim, thank you. I was reminded to turn my camera off a few minutes into your talk, which was fortuitous, because otherwise you'd have just seen me nodding and smiling in a sort of a slightly absurd fashion, but a powerful and, as ever, compelling context that really sets the tone for what LESSIN and this next session is all about. LESSIN itself is very much, I think, the consequence of the drive and the vision of Scottish Enterprise and Highlands and Islands Enterprise. And so it's now time to hear from them. And so it's with real pleasure that I ask Andy MacDonald, head of low carbon transition team at Scottish Enterprise, to make his contribution. Andy, over to you.
Phil, thank you very much, and my thanks to you as well for the words of the Minister, and to Sir Jim for his words as well. I'd like to add my welcome and introduction to everyone that's participating today. As was noted, we, along with our colleagues in High and the Scottish Government, had a large part to do with the development of the LESSIN network, and continue to be obviously amongst the sponsors. We're delighted to have secured the support of the team at Energy Systems Catapult and the ETP to help deliver the programme on behalf of ourselves and the partners. And I would just add, at the time that we started to develop this work, our colleagues in the South of Scotland Enterprise Agency were just being drawn together. So just reassure anyone from the South of Scotland, LESSIN is a pan-Scotland initiative, fully open to companies and organisations in the South of Scotland, and we are working with our colleagues there on the organisation and running of the network. We're going to continue, obviously, to be very active in steering the project to make sure we deliver on the targets that have been set for us and for our partners, and the broader ambitions for the development of the local energy sector, energy system sector in Scotland. It's been on our agenda for many years. Professor MacDonald referenced the focus that's been on this in Scotland, and it's been on our agenda as an economic development agency. And our involvement really started to advance significantly in 2018 with the publication of the Scottish Government Energy Strategy, which strongly advocated the local energy systems approach as an important means of meeting our low carbon targets. We've been well involved with our partners in leading both a programme board and a stakeholder group to oversee the development of the sector since then, and to begin to pull together some of the activities which LESSIN is a part of. And we were able there as a group to have significant input into the Scottish Government's local energy policy statement, which was referenced earlier on as well, and is a huge and important message in terms of the way forward. We also helped develop a vision for how best to support the sector as part of that work with stakeholders and the programme board. And an important first step in that vision was recognised as the establishment of LESSIN. So, as I say, absolutely delighted to be here to formally launch the initiative today. The economic opportunity associated with local energy systems is enormous, just in 3 specific areas where we think there are significant opportunities for Scotland: in continuing development of smart grids, development of renewable power to heat, and the potential in renewable power to hydrogen. We estimate the market size in 2030 is almost £700 million for Scotland alone, and £350 billion globally. And our role is to make sure that Scottish companies capitalise on that global opportunity to the greatest extent possible. And we already have a significant company base in Scotland. There's over 420 companies identified at the last count that are either already involved or have the potential to be involved in the local energy system space. Over half of those companies are SMEs. Excuse me. Roughly 2/3 are developing their own technologies or software. That means there's a huge potential as well for growth and the creation of high-value jobs in the sector. There will, however, be many challenges that we must overcome, and that again is part of the rationale for the creation of LESSIN. There will be gaps in skills and supply chain that we will need to identify and address, connections to be made between the companies and with projects both in Scotland and internationally, and we'll draw on the extensive network we have overseas through Scottish Development International and other partners as well. And a crucial support for innovation to facilitate and unlock investment in the sector. We believe that LESSIN will enable us to overcome many of those challenges and set us on the right course to make the greatest advantage of those economic opportunities. But going forwards, the network's only going to be as strong as the level of engagement it receives. So I would encourage everyone, please do sign up to participate as much as you can over the next 2 years and help us to maximise the benefits to ourselves, to the wider sector and to the economy here in Scotland, and obviously in our contribution to the low carbon targets. I really encourage everybody to do that, and my thanks again to everybody participating this morning for getting us to this point and to working with our partners and going forward. And Phil, at that point, I'll hand back to you. Thank you.
Andy, thank you very much, and thank you for the great leadership that you've already shown to this project in helping it bring it to the point that it's at now. Now it's time to turn to Audrey McIver, who's Director of Energy and Low Carbon at Highlands and Islands Enterprise, and to their perspective from Audrey. So Audrey, over to you.
Thank you, Phil. Yes, good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to add to the opening remarks from the Minister and the excellent context from Sir Jim and the detail we've just heard from Andy. I don't really want to take too long because a lot has already been said and really want to get into the detail of the lesson programme, but really just to reinforce that this is a call to action to you all. We in the Highlands and Islands enterprise want to build on the phenomenal success that we've already witnessed in the region in demonstrating local low carbon energy systems and enable this approach to be more widely adopted across the country to address fuel poverty, ensure greater efficiency and security of supply, and to create world-leading exportable knowledge in doing so. We recognise that supporting and delivering local solutions to meet local needs, linking the local generation and use, can and actually does help create vibrant local energy economies. Kind of difficult to say, but much of the success in the Highlands and Islands has been born from adversity and necessity. Islands that have been completely off the electricity grid or where extreme grid constraints continue to stifle renewable generation, and generation that is absolutely required to meet our really ambitious net zero targets. Innovative approaches and resilience in our communities has led to extremely successful projects. Egg Electric, Surf and Turf, Big Hit, Smile, Reflex, Fair Isle Energy Project, to name but a few. These are producing hydrogen from wind and tidal energy. They're deploying storage solutions to match supply with demand, integrating multiple energy sources and uses, and securing a 24-hour electricity supply. And many of you on the call today, I believe, will have been very involved in those projects. But as we seek to address the even more challenging targets of decarbonising our heat, transport, and our energy-intensive industries, holistic and integrated energy systems will be absolutely key. So the learning from these earlier groundbreaking projects and the experience gained by the businesses and communities participating in them really provides a solid platform for the LESSIN programme. So please do engage in it. Collectively, let's ensure that as we move to local energy systems, we increase the security of energy supplies, we reduce the cost of sustainable energy sources in meeting our power, heat and transport needs, and we stimulate innovative businesses and community development opportunities. Thank you. Back to you, Phil.
Audrey, thank you very much. Just a couple of reflections on what we've heard, and I'll keep this very, very brief because I think there was some fantastic context and information there. I mean, the importance of whole systems and whole systems approaches is very apparent. And what I think is really interesting is how Scotland is clearly leading the way, I think, in working through whole systems, not just at a national level, but understanding what that means at a local level. And a system is only a system when it includes all levels of aggregation. So the leadership that's being shown here by thinking through how to build stronger local systems, but have them play a role integrated into the development of national systems, I think is really compelling, really exciting. And a few other things that have come through are the importance of building skills, the importance of social inclusion, and engaging local communities in the transition, because we have to remember, I mean, it's to the democratization point, you know, the end user, the consumer, has the veto on the energy transition. And finally, the absolutely critical importance that digitalization will play. So if we could just move to the next slide, please. I don't know if that's showing for other people yet. I'm not seeing a new slide on the screen at the moment.
No, me neither.
So, there seems to be a sort of a technology lag going on here. One of the things that happened when we asked people to register for this we inquired about what people thought was going to be really important to focus on in this in the network. And what became clear was that there was quite a remarkable overlap between what people thought was important for them, their own personal area of interest, and what was important to the sector. We can't see the interesting graphic, so I'll just describe it briefly. What came out as being of high importance was technology and vectors. What people were also quite interested in was digital information. And another thing that was really salient, which I think LESSIN does play into, is institutional roles, organizations, actors, and decisions. And I think it's networks like this that can help crystallize and enable and catalyze some responses to support decision making going forward. I'm interested in whether or not that very sort of, in a sense, almost polarized reflection that people shared in registration reinforces or undermines the notion of a whole system, because there are so many other components that need to be taken into account. But there was a very, very strong sort of view coming through the initial feedback that said technology is the thing that is of most interest to everyone. Now, innovation in technology is critical, but perhaps one would say it's only going to work if we can start to figure through the business models, the right regulatory framework, the right connections, the right institutional arrangements, the right skills and competencies, and so forth. So that might be an interesting strand to develop further. I'm a little bit concerned because I'm still not seeing any. Has everyone else now got the new slide up? Because I don't have it.
No, I don't see it either. It's just stuck on the significance of LES in the Highlands and Islands slide.
That's what I've got.
So
Rob,
Phil, I think other people. Phil, I think other people have got different positions. So there's some comments in the chat about what to do, but I don't fully understand it, I'm afraid. Thoughts in the audience.
People at home can move the slides for their view, but it won't move it for everybody else. So if Rob's able to reshare them, maybe we can try and.
I'll start the sharing again. 1 second.
So my apologies for this. Hopefully we'll be able to rattle through. And that was the graphic that I was talking about a second ago, where you can see very clearly that technology and vectors comes out as being something that is of really paramount interest to both the individuals here, but also perceived as being important for the sector. And so I'm interested in whether or not in the relationship between that graphic and what a whole system approach might look like, which I would anticipate being slightly more evenly spread around the spider's web that we see there. Anyway, let's move on. And now we're just going to spend a few minutes quickly going through some of the sort of the architecture of what LESSIN is. We've covered some of the context, but now who's involved, what's it about, why is it here? So if we could start. This is just a description of what's happening. So on behalf of the Catapult, as I said earlier, I think we're thrilled and delighted to be able to engage partnering with ETP in supporting this network and working on behalf of Scottish Enterprise and Highlands and Islands Enterprise. So it's supported by EU ESIF funding. The Scottish Government, Scottish Enterprise and Highlands Enterprise are, as I think we've already heard, right, really confident that this cluster building approach will be highly beneficial for Scotland in supporting and stimulating innovation in local energy systems. It's a vision that I think we completely subscribe to. We think that this sector can only grow in the coming years, and as again I think I've already mentioned, you know, I think there's more and more evidence that Scotland is actually leading the way in thinking through how this might happen, but also thinking through what are the relationships, what are the institutional structures, what are the frameworks that are going to be necessary to make it so. And so, you know, obviously our aspiration is that the practical support that can be delivered through LESSIN will help deliver really tangible, actionable steps towards meeting the objectives of the Scottish Government's forthcoming local energy systems policy statement. And you know, let's all try and build a brilliant legacy, a platform for future growth, but also a legacy that will resonate into the future. So if we can now, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Yes, it works. Thank you. What's LESSIN here to do? Really, I think this is about trying to build consortia, collaborations, and relationships around the broad theme of local energy systems. So as you can see here, there is a role to be played in raising awareness within and across Scotland, but also raising awareness, I think, internationally about the capabilities and the capacity that is present and developing quickly here. Developing a network in Scotland that can have an enduring role in helping bring things together. Identifying clusters and communities of practice, absolutely critical, and creating sort of meta communities of practice as well. So sort of a system of systems, a community of communities. Encourage industry to innovate. This needs to have a strong promotion of innovation at its heart, but ultimately, of course, to build the consortia that will enable these innovative ideas and new business models to create, to form, to get funding, and to scale. So that's what we think LESSIN is here to do. And let's now switchly turn to the benefits for people who are up for participating in the network. So the Catapult and ETP will work with the members of LESSIN to try and enable really great access to business development support. So we could offer one-to-one business development surgeries, innovation support, highlight and headline where funding opportunities are coming through. We think there's something about sharing learning, sharing best practice, helping make sure that we only make a mistake one time rather than making the same mistake several times, benefiting from the wisdom that can exist across such a network, and helping make sure that real synergies start to emerge. Connecting and building links so that people are able to access the information that is out there and that I hope will be developed through the experience of participants in the network. So having a sort of a knowledge exchange capability seems to us to be important. Sharing the challenges and sharing the insights into how people have responded to and adapted to those challenges, and frankly bringing some of the insights, some of the responses that, for example, my organisation has developed from experience in other contexts. And I think critically, gaining insights into new business models. To scale, we need to have systems and approaches that are going to be investable, where the market is clear about how it can play a role in taking the solutions forward. So developing those business models, developing really acute insight into where market failures might be, so that policy can be informed to surgically intervene to deal with those market failures and unleash private capital and private innovation seems to be critical. So in bringing together manufacturers, project developers, technology companies, innovation support organizations, knowledge communities, investors, to cultivate a low carbon ecosystem, a really rich low carbon ecosystem in Scotland, and ultimately, of course, beyond Scotland. That, I think, is what this is ultimately about. So at this stage, to take us into rather more detail about the practicalities of LESSIN, I'm going to hand over to some colleagues. And first of all, Jim Lott, who is the technical liaison lead from the Energy Systems Catapult. Jim, over to you.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, everyone, for all of the speakers up to this point. I think the context has been set very well. I think Phil has given us an understanding of what we would like LESSIN to achieve. I'm going to spend a little bit of time just talking about what that actually means in terms of activity. So let me introduce myself. My name's Jim Lott. I am the ERIS Technical Liaison Lead at the Catapult. ERIS being a program that was set up in response to the Prospering from the Energy Revolution Industrial Strategy Challenge to address the challenges around local energy systems and delivery of especially the smart element around that. Can I just, the chat is being used very well. We are going to have a Q&A at the end of the next couple of sessions. So if you do have questions and comments, please bring them in. We'll have a session where we can go backwards and forwards on those. If there's any specific questions, we can ask them of the appropriate people in the room. So really, LESSIN is a network. It's made of the people and the capabilities and the expertise within that network. So really, the first step we need is to form it, and that starts today. So from today, we're going to start building membership. We're going to get people to register, and I'll provide a link in the chat towards the end of this session, and we can start providing that innovation support that Phil was talking about. We also want to identify the key challenges for the Scottish local energy systems or community. And that's really the first phase of LESSIN. I'll talk a little bit more about the timelines for those in a moment. And then really out for a couple of years, LESSIN really needs to evolve. And out to sort of March 23, when the current tranche of funding input sort of pauses, we want to work on basically making sure the network fulfills members' needs. We want to respond to the sector requirements, which areas are the challenges, and start building knowledge around those. That knowledge will be kept and retained throughout the lifetime of LESSIN. And then the final bit is releasing LESSIN. So LESSIN matures. LESSIN goes out into the future being a self-sustaining set of communities and knowledge that works together in order to advance the future local energy systems, both in Scotland and beyond. Next slide, please. So it all sounds great, but what actually is it? So as part of LESSIN, we have a dedicated collaboration team that will be available to facilitate and work with the members of the LESSIN network, working around providing a collaboration platform, a program of webinars, workshops, and sort of cluster activities. Also direct support to members of the network. That's very much focused on innovative SMEs, but there will be support available to others. And we will also be referring support to other organisations that may be better placed than we can provide directly through LESSIN. So ETP, for example, have a lot of experience of referring on to academics and other industry organisations. And anybody who wants to provide support is welcome in, and we're going to start building sort of a collaboration directory, if you like, so we can start understanding where people can be referred to. We also really want to understand those challenges so we can focus our effort and our work as best we can. The real output from this is consortiums of projects, people trying things, delivering things, looking for opportunities to scale and replicate. So really a key part of the LESSIN activity is to support consortiums, to join people up who can work together to deliver something bigger than any of them can independently. But also to make sure those consortiums address some of those whole systems issues, as Phil was alluding to earlier. Having just the technology focus and maybe the digital focus will only get you so far in delivering local energy systems. So how can we broaden that thinking and make sure that LESSIN allows that broader systems thinking to be brought into consortia? We also want to provide a route for sharing knowledge. So we'll be providing repositories and documents and tools as we find them off the network. We'll be acting as a central hub for locating those and being able to access those. But ultimately, we'll be looking to strengthen relationships between everybody in the network. So everybody, we'll try and make sure that everybody understands what everybody's expertise, needs, and what support they might be able to provide. Next slide, please. So digging a little bit deeper, what does it actually mean? So the way we've structured the next couple of years is around what we're calling waves, theme-based waves. Because the local energy system sector landscape is vast, complex, has many different actors in many different sort of roles, we thought it was best to try and initially at least focus on a couple of very key themes. For the first theme, for the first wave, we have a couple of themes sort of in mind, but ultimately each theme will be driven by the members. So the members of the network will be deciding where they want to put the effort, what sessions they'd like, what challenges they'd like to talk about. We do have our first theme event in our calendar for the 18th of May, where we'll kick off the first wave. And let's talk a little bit more about what actually a wave is. Next slide, please. So really, when we're talking about a wave, we're talking about a 5 to 6 month period of activity. There's a number of parallel activities that will sit within a wave. We will have sort of workshops and challenge sessions trying to define out those key areas where we need support and referrals. We'll also have cluster building activities, so supporting consortia to talk to each other, trying to help people identify others with similar expertise or required expertise, and also that knowledge sharing, so starting to build that body of knowledge and capturing that. In parallel to that, we also have the innovator support to eligible SMEs. The word eligible is in there. In order to be eligible for the one-to-one innovator support, you need to be an SME with a registered office in Scotland. This is sort of due to the funding stream that's come in, but we think that's also really key in driving the Scottish element of the local energy systems within LESSIN. And there'll be a series of workshops, webinars, sort of alongside that, as well as sort of one-to-ones and surgeries. So within that structure, everybody in LESSIN should be able to find some events that fit their need. And if not, we will take feedback and evolve those themes based on the members' needs. And what is the output of a wave? So really, at this point, a wave needs to then continue on. It needs to come out with either a challenge group that are looking at a particular funding stream or a particular challenge, or maybe a beginnings of a community of practice around a particular area. But really, the output of a wave is not the activities. The output of the wave is the self-sustaining activity that happens afterwards due to people being joined up. Next slide, please. Quick timeline on what that actually means. So we're at our LESSIN launch now, the blue box there. The Wave 1 launch is in the beginning of May. So really, between then and now, we'll be doing awareness building, registration, and starting to build and share those directories so that people can understand who else is in the network, what their interests and expertise are, and where they can offer support. From May, we'll sort of start our first theme wave, 5-6 months. Once that one's wrapped up, we'll start another theme wave so that the collaboration team is focused on a particular subject. Next slide, please. So our first event in May, we did a lot of discussion with local industry stakeholders and a bit of research as well, including the audience research that was done for this event indicates this as well. Our first event really is to be trying to understand what local energy systems are and what their opportunities and challenges are. So that first theme should be really helpful for everybody to get involved and understand what we mean by local energy system and where their expertise, is really focused well. We'd really like to have a deep dive into digitisation as well. As was mentioned earlier by the key speakers, digitisation is a huge part of the 3Ds or the 4Ds, if we include democratisation, in driving these local energy systems. They're reliant on digitisation. We know that the availability, access and integration of the data and digital landscape is not sufficient currently for local energy systems. So where can we drive that change in order to support and accelerate local energy systems in Scotland? Next slide, please. So how do we do that? So there's a register link there, which hopefully one of my colleagues will copy into the chat so that you can start registering after this event. Once you've registered, there'll be a few weeks of just consolidating that registration list and sort of analysing through while we build the directories, etc. And then we'll be moving to a collaboration space where which is the ESC's Energy Launchpad, which is currently being launched sort of as we speak, which allows groups of people to sort of host and collaborate with other network members. It also provides our hub for learning repository materials. There's international market information on there as part of the hub, and there's also access to funders and investing information on there. As part of the Launchpad, we'll also be providing that referral service. And really, to use the word that was used earlier in a slightly different context, that is a swarm of activity, hence the beehive hexagons. Around the Launchpad. So creating that swarm of activity and those swarm of projects, I think, is really key. So I'm glad Sir Jim used that phrase earlier, because I think that works very well. Next slide, please. So that's all I'm going to say about the mechanics of the whole thing. I'm sure there's plenty of questions. Please ask them in the chat. If not, make sure you register on the link from the page that will be provided, because that will allow us to get in touch with you. Once you're registered, we have your details. We can start sending out newsletters, etc. Then we can start talking to you and you can talk to us. We also have an email address that Natasha will talk about in a moment, where if you want to start conversations with us, please do that. I wanted to leave you with two questions. These are the two that I feel are key to the success of LESSIN as a network. What does the sector, the Scottish local energy system sector, see as major challenges to commercialisation and growth? Because that's where we are. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at scaling and replication. We know inherently, and Scotland is a long way ahead of some others on this, demonstrator projects we have technology demonstrators, we have, the technical skills are there. What is stopping us making this the normal? What is making this mainstream? So what are those challenges? The other question I think is important to hold in our minds as we start is, what is a Scottish local energy system network best placed to explore? And by that I mean, what is a particular aspect of the Scottish sector that we can drill down on and accelerate, that will demonstrate to the rest of the world that Scotland is a leader? Is there something particular about how Scotland works, about the kind of technology sectors it has, about the kind of system sectors it has, or even in its attitude to testing and demonstration, that makes the Scottish version of this network particularly good? I am going to hand over to Natasha Madeira from ETP now, our partner in delivering the facilitation of LESSIN, on how to get involved and what comes next. Please put your things in the chat, because we'll have a Q&A session after Natasha. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me, but couldn't hear me earlier on. Just to say that I work with ETP, the team of us, supporting innovation and collaboration between the Scottish academic sector and business sector and any other organisations relevant to the energy themes, which we cover all of them. I work with Energy Systems Catapult as the Scottish representative, and acting as the interim lesson collaboration coordinator as we recruit somebody full-time to work on this. Can you do the next slide, please, Rob? So we've mentioned a lot about the network. Just to explain a little bit who the network should consist of. So basically, the aim for the direct support from the network is for SMEs who have a Scottish office or a Scottish base, as Jim mentioned, but the Scottish industry sector and local energy systems need to work with a wide variety of partners and organisations and cross sectors and disciplines in order to achieve this whole systems approach to energy systems and local energy systems. So if we look at where the local SMEs or local energy systems SMEs fit within the wider group, we're looking at local energy system industry as a whole, which already knows it's relevant to local energy systems, but the wider energy industry who may be working more in the old terms and need to progress and develop as we transition to more distributed energy system, more integrated. And then we look at the wider Scottish local energy systems community as a whole. If we think about this wider ecosystem, which Phil mentioned at the beginning, this whole ecosystem for local energy systems needs to work. So it's systems of systems across collaboration across systems, across policymakers, communities, industry, public sector, private sector, and specialised industry. And then you need to look at the wider elements. So I'm trying to map out a little bit for you in the next slide, Rob, how this can be broken down. This is an example for you where we're trying to understand who within, which organisations within Scotland could make up this local energy systems community, and how we need to support that community to work together and identify challenges and take those forwards and develop the sector as a whole to meet those challenges. So if you think of LESSIN members in this little honeycomb here, you have the research development and deployment community, site owners and operators, which could be from public, private or community sectors, project leads, and again, they can be from many quarters, funders and investors, the innovation support community, again, which is varied, and industry, both large and SMEs, within Scotland and out with Scotland. We've had lots of questions in the chat about collaboration opportunities further afield. So this network is a Scottish network with a Team Scotland support. By that I mean all of the innovation organisations, the enterprise agencies, Scottish Government, innovation centres and so on. We are working together. We hope to harmonise this process to work together to support the Scottish network and identify what those common challenges are and help support or increase those opportunities and ways in which we take those forward. But again, this can only be done with everybody working together. The Energy Systems Catapult and ETP are supporting or setting up a framework to facilitate this, and the Team Scotland support network should be coming together within this framework to help support those who are in need of it. And our activities that Jim explained in terms of our wave engagement and surgeries, one-to-one surgeries with businesses and organisations will help identify that. But crucially, the wider partners, the wider support team, and we would like you to get in touch with us and help us shape how we connect you or refer organisations who need support to you. So that's something we'll be doing in the early stages. Next slide, please, Rob. So I'm just mapping out here some of those squares here, just to give you an idea. So for site owners and operators, we can have maybe community estates or utilities or transport estates or NHS. There are already clusters of activity coming together on the subject of local energy systems integration, and we'll hope that this framework will help take those forward in a more effective way. The research and development community, again, is very varied. We have organisations like ETP, Interface, Data Lab, Zero Waste Scotland, and so on, who work in different areas which are relevant to local energy systems, who can support in terms of business development support or funding, or just helping in terms of collaborations, identifying opportunities in terms of funding, both here and further afield. So there are other cluster builders like this one, and again, we're trying to bring those cluster builders together and understand how what the best practice is for that, and again share that. and again, with opportunities for funding both here and further afield, we'll try and support brokerage for that. ETP has already been doing that, and we'll try and set up a framework and for supporting that with all of the partners under LESSIN. And again, link up organisations with facilities and demonstrators as is needed. To the next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through these all again, but it's a similar case for innovation support community. We have the catapults, test and demo centres, industry representatives, and for project leads, again, we want people to come forward who have project ideas or current projects and might want to take them to the next stage or scale or replicate, and to lead activity in taking those forward. So we will help set up a framework to do that and activities to do that, but it's up to yourselves as members to take those activities forward, and we can support where we can. The next slide. So again, with funders and investors, we will have a process for supporting introductions to investors and other funders. The funding bodies, again, are quite wide and broad, but there's a specific fund being set up just now for Scotland, for Scottish organisations, which will hopefully come online in a couple of months. So again, there will be further opportunities there, and the kind of opportunities that we're developing in terms of projects will I hope bear fruit and help shape the direction of funding priorities or create opportunities for funding specific initiatives, which we hope will be commercially viable, so investable projects, rather than being reliant on subsidies and grant funding. And again, industry, this network is the core for this network is core industry. Again, think about industry as the widest definition you can. We're trying to identify what areas of industry are relevant to local energy systems, but maybe not identify themselves as relevant to local energy systems, in which case we'd like you to spread the word and try and help us map out who needs to be involved in this to make this work. Next slide, please. So just a summary, we'd like to know your suggestions and advice on what are these challenges, what is being explored in Scotland just now, how would you like to get involved? Who should we be working with? What support is needed for all of the organisations and so we can identify how that support can be provided? And how would you like to collaborate through the Energy Launchpad platform? This platform will be developed with your input and ideas, and hopefully over the next couple of years we'll develop something which helps us collaborate more easily and will enable this network to be self-sustaining in the long term. Next slide, please. So again, just a summary of what's next for the team, the LESSIN team, to set this up. First of all, we're doing stakeholder mapping, which at this stage, building up the membership, and then trying to harmonise how the support is provided by those who need support, and set up processes for doing that with our partners. So how we do the referrals and how we monitor that and monitor progress and how this is working, so that our funders can see that we're setting up something that actually is supporting you. And we'll be collating contributions to resources and setting up a sort of a resource hub for that. We will like to identify what your support needs are, and there'll be some one-to-ones and other workshops to help do that. And the forward planning and engagement waves, as Jim mentioned, again, your input on what is needed and how we address that. But these are collaborative waves. So other initiatives and organisations who have things relevant to that, we hope that you will all be joining us in those activities and helping to provide events or workshops as well alongside us. So the next steps: register as a member, get in contact with us and get involved, and spread the word. And I'll just hand back to Phil, and hopefully there are more questions in the chat that I haven't quite looked at yet.
Thank you very much, Natasha. Unfortunately, time is galloping on. There are a few questions and themes have come through, though. So first of all, a lot of real warmth and enthusiasm for best practice sharing and knowledge sharing, and some really useful suggestions about how that can be taken forward. And I know, Natasha, you've been engaging with that chat on the sidebar as well. So I thought that was fabulous. there are some more technical questions which I think we can try to address perhaps offline, but instead just a couple of questions that are very specific to LESSIN and its role in the broader ecosystem. And so one question from Terry is, how does the LESSIN project interface with the current active initiatives and programmes run by Local Energy Scotland, Home Energy Scotland, Energy Savings Trust, which to some degree support types of local energy systems, dispersed generation, so forth? And so, is there going to be a risk of overlap and confusion? Natasha or Jim, would you like to say a few words about that?
Natasha, would you like to comment on that?
So we've had questions since we've been doing presentations on LESSIN. We've had presentations about existing organisations and the concern for overlap. The whole point of this network is to try and harmonise existing activity that is out there, but bring it together on the theme of local energy systems. So when I say to you, want you to help shape how we do this, I mean that I would like you to help shape. So contact us and we will set up the collaboration platform in a way that organisations that already perform a role and have support or do an activity are represented in a way that we can then refer organisations directly to whoever can provide that support. We're not trying to duplicate, we're not trying to take over the role of any other organisation. We will have existing functions, and we would just like to help streamline that for the case from the perspective of the SMEs or industry, so that their journey through the innovation and business development is as seamless as possible, and we're all joined up and working joined up towards that same goal.
And I think there was various other questions around that theme of how we really make sure that this is additional and complementary as opposed to duplicative, and sort of reflective of things in the past. Another question that's come through, which I think is quite interesting, and perhaps this will be the last one we touch on: how will the network ensure that very real people impacted by local energy systems development will not be negatively impacted? So how do we in a real whole system sense take account of questions of social equity, of exclusion and inclusion, and of embracing the whole community, not just the sort of the technology forward people?
I think this is something that Ofgem has been looking at this inequality question for quite some time, and is working more towards making this more equitable, removing some of the regulatory and policy barriers which have had unintended consequences. So it is a question which is quite high on the priority for Ofgem and the regulators, but it is also a question which is quite difficult to deal with. So I think that is probably one of the core challenges that we can maybe address through the engagement events through LESSIN. And I hope that all the organisations like Community Energy Scotland, Ofgem and the Systems Advice Bureau, who've been working with Ofgem on this, can help us shape a way forward and what challenges we need to address as priority.
Great. I'm really pleased to hear you answer in those words, Natasha. I think it is an integral part of any whole systems approach that it is inclusive of all people in society, and we have to ideally use some of the insights that we can gain from, understanding how technology can best be deployed, digitalization and so forth, to help put in place increasingly smart ways of bringing everyone into the tent and not leaving anyone behind. So that's fabulous. Time is running out. So I think there are a number of questions and comments in the sidebar. The team will assemble them and respond as appropriate. And obviously, if this community does grow in the way that we're hoping, there'll be plenty more opportunities to continue with the exchanges that have been mentioned here. What I'd like to do now, though, is turn to Neil Kermode, who is the Managing Director at the European Marine Energy Centre, and will have his own perspective on expectations and aspirations for LESSIN. So, Neil, over to you.
Thanks very much indeed, Phil, and I hope people can hear me okay. What I'm going to do is to share a couple of screens and stuff, so I hope you're now seeing that. I'm Managing Director of EMEC, the European Marine Energy Centre, based in Orkney, and you've heard a lot about what Orkney is doing as a whole, but I wanted to bring a perspective to bear about how we've been able to pull things together, and particularly this item about the Reflex project. I'm not going to tell you in great detail about how Reflex works, but I'm anticipating these slides are available to people afterwards and happy to take questions. But the point is that we, through a local community-based initiative, based around the members of the Orkney Renewable Energy Forum over a number of years, we pulled together pretty much a groundbreaking project. So the point reaching out onto the make was that, as Sarah mentioned earlier, it's about trying to build something from the community upwards. And we've realised we've actually got something a bit special, because this is a picture of one of our members showed of what the UK electricity grid looks like, and the green was the renewables being generated, the grey is the electricity supply and demand back in August 2019, and the waviness of the line on the bottom is wind, and the spikiness is due to solar. And they've realised that if you then quadruple the amount of renewables that's on the network, you simply end up with this. And we were able to compare that with what's going on in Orkney, because we've got good data gathering systems we've worked out over a number of years, which show that this is the picture that we have in Orkney. So the point is, we have a condition, we knew we had a condition, which effectively showed what the rest of the world was going to be facing. So we realised there was an opportunity to do something about this and use the experience that we had as a local network to actually make change. And that's really what I hope LESSIN is going to be able to do. It's about empowering people to recognise they have bits of the local solution themselves, but they may not necessarily have the contacts or the confidence to reach out to others to actually turn it into something real. One of the outputs that we had quite quickly from the Reflex project, which is UK government funded, was a refresh of the energy audit that was done in 2014-15. We did a new one back in 2019, or Aquaterra did, and it showed where we are using our fuels. And the point is, it shows the distribution of how we use fuels in the community right now. Now, that's critically important because it allows us to target our activities and means that from a local point of view, we tackle the things that are important. So if you look at the bottom, the darkish blue area towards the bottom shows the scale of marine transport. Now, clearly that's distinctly relevant to us, but it's not necessarily going to be relevant to other local energy systems. But you've got to know your own energy system before you know what to tackle. The other thing it also did was it showed, frankly, how far we haven't come. So Orkney's done a huge amount, but actually we've only really done the green bit. So there's a huge amount to work on. So the Reflex project was pulled together, which really looks at looking across the whole piece. And as somebody mentioned about, I think it was Jim mentioned about the importance of looking at power, transport and heat. So we haven't sought to focus purely on the electricity end, which is where my background comes from. And we looked at it across the piece. But it's also critically important that we recognise that this is a community of people who are going to want to make a change. So that reach into what people want to do and shaping what people want to do is critically important. And that requires things, or a network of people who are beyond just those people who are technocrats. There's sociology, there's marketing, there's a whole range of stuff that needs to come in. And this is really the strength of where a network needs to apply. And we've really seen that this is important because it's not just about what we do in Orkney. Orkney's interesting to me, it's interesting to the people around me, but frankly, it's pretty dull to a lot of other people. But we know there's replication needed. We know that this needs to be applied to other locations, not just in the UK, but around the world. And that therefore provides an opportunity for Scotland to export expertise and repatriate money, frankly. So this is a market opportunity that exists right now, as we reshape our energy system in a way that frankly hasn't been shaped anything, or hasn't had this amount of effort put into it since the rebuilding at the end of the Second World War. So we see that there are huge opportunities that exist. And I wanted to give you an example really towards the end, which is about how important locality is and how the need is to bring together people from different localities to share experiences, learn from each other, and find ways to build new collaborations. Because we really believe that locality shapes solutions. And the case I wanted to offer is that what we did with tidal energy here in Orkney, because we started off with the problem, which is the grid isn't big enough to take the energy we're generating. We ended up then looking at different ways of storing, and through some work was done by Exodus and Element Energy, and we looked at the opportunities to store energy on our tides, which principally came down to, can we store the excess energy from the top of the tides, generate electricity in the gaps, and actually end up with a flatline result and output, effectively baseload. And that then led towards hydrogen. We're using hydrogen as our storage vector. But very quickly we recognised through some work that was done that showed that yes, we can turn our hydrogen back into electricity, and it's worth about 30 pence a kilogram. Or alternatively, you can use it for propulsion for the ferries, for example, that we have here, and it's worth nearly 30 times as much. So the point is that starting off in one particular thing, we innovated in one area, it led us to other places. And we were able to do that through communication. And the point I really want to drive home is once you started with hydrogen, it's led us into a lot of other places which we believe are both profitable and worth exploring as we decarbonise our climate. So now we're working in help building up the supply chain. We're working with a tidal energy company. That's the picture of the orbital device that's under construction in Dundee at the moment. We're working at putting hydrogen into ferries, into distilleries. We've been helped with propelling the first hydrogen-powered aircraft. You know, all these things have happened because we started to innovate, and innovation opens doors. And that's the piece I really hope that the LESSIN network is going to give us. It's not doing the things we expect to do. It's finding the things we hadn't expected to do. And the final thing I just wanted to close up with is those of you who know me well know how much I love a good quote, and this one really strikes me from Henry Ford. And this is where the network I think can really help, because coming together is the beginning and keeping together is progress, but working together, that's the success. And that's what I really hope LESSIN is actually going to be able to enable and deliver, because if we know what's going on, we have the effective means to communicate with as fewer filters and obstructions as possible. We stand a chance of working together, and that will lead to success. That's all I wanted to say. Phil, I'll hand back to you.
Neil, thank you so much. It's I'm so glad that we were able to hear from you. You know, we can have all the fine aspirational words in the world, and we can go through well-planned process. These are all important, but the opportunity to actually experience these things in action is priceless, energizing, and inspiring. So, Neil, thank you. That was great. You know, and it does feel to me as though we have to go into this with you know, open minds and sort of a generosity of spirit. What's new for me, and why I'm particularly excited about all of this, is that as Sir Jim was sort of alluding to at the beginning, it feels as though the penny is beginning to drop around the importance of systems, of whole systems approaches. It's something that many people have thought of as sort of self-evident for a while, but now it's really beginning to land. The other thing that's changing is that I think that people are beginning to understand that it isn't enough just to look at the big, huge top-down vectors and fixing those. They're they're a critical part of the transition, but the local aspect is critical as well. So it does feel as though we're at a point of inflection where whole systems approaches and local approaches are, you know, the time is right for them. And what's really, really exciting, as again I think I've indicated before, is it does seem to me that Scotland is absolutely leading the way in understanding this and grasping it and taking it forward. So I think that I'm really optimistic for the potential of this network. So some of the key messages, you know, what's it all about? It's about having building up a capacity for mutual support and collaboration. It's creating a framework. So it's sort of hosting the party, but the party relies on everyone on this call to participate and get involved and engage. Hopefully then the impact of local energy systems in Scotland, but beyond Scotland, as we saw from Neil's chart earlier, becomes something that is possible. We'll be able to build that legacy. We'll be able to build and I hope scale from the foundations. So it's not just creating the foundations, it's got to be about building on those foundations and providing some really tangible steps towards turning this into business as usual. So if you are interested in getting involved, and I do hope you are, then just a reminder of the mechanisms. So if we go to the last slide, please, Rob.
I think there's Phil, if you can just read it out.
Yeah, so so first of all, to register then, there's https:// so escatapult.org.uk, impact projects, local energy system, Scottish industry network. If you just go to the Energy System Catapult website, it'll be signposted for you there. And you've now met Natasha. I'm sure many of you know her already anyway. And so Natasha is standing by and able to help guide, support, and discuss with you as you contemplate how best to engage. So lesson at es.catapult.org.uk is the .org.uk, sorry, is the email address to use. And otherwise, all I would ask you to do is sort of let other people know about this. Let's really try and turn this into a vibrant, active, positive community, and let's just show what's possible. So to all of you, thank you for sparing your time, and I hope you have a great rest of a Wednesday. Okay, bye then.